I spoke earlier with Hugh Evans, co-founder and CEO of Global Citizen, about how he managed to get the royal couple involved.
Well, I think ultimately the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were incredibly passionate about the issue of vaccine equity. And they immediately said that they wanted to call on the private sector to step up. So together with Prince Harry and Meghan, we convened a roundtable focused on encouraging the Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies to commit dollars for doses. And immediately companies like Cisco and Procter and Gamble and Coca Cola and Mastercard and so many others signed on to be part of the initiative. And so we were able to raise enough to purchase over 10 million doses immediately for those who need them most.
So many big names on board. Talk us maybe through your highlights in terms of who you got involved, and also, of course, let Australians know when they'll be able to tune into this.
So Australians can tune in this coming Sunday on YouTube and also on Channel 10. But I understand that probably for most people, it'll be tuning in through YouTube globally. But the way in which, the thing that was really the heart of the mission behind Vax Live was focused on two things. Firstly, was encouraging people to take the vaccine because, we've seen globally that there are varying degrees of hesitancy, but depending on which market. And we wanted people to follow the science and actually understand that the vaccine is safe and that it's effective. And secondly, we're focused on really, addressing the issue of vaccine inequity, because here in the United States currently we're seeing universal coverage of the vaccine, whereas, we've all seen the news that India, for example, passed over 18 million cases of COVID, and they broke the record for the number of consecutive cases in a single day. And that's obviously because there isn't the readily available supply of vaccines. So we're calling on the G20 nations to follow President Macron's lead and commit to give 5% of doses to the least developed countries immediately. And we're encouraged that many G20 nations are starting to do just that.
Yeah, look, it's such a huge part of this. There's self-interest too, because if these countries have COVID go rife through them, then you get more of these mutant strains. So it's in our interest as well. What have you made of the Australian government on that approach so far?
Well, I think, I've seen promising signs that the Australian government has been committed to make initial contributions to support Papua New Guinea and the most near neighbours. And I think that, the Australian government should be commended for that initial action that the Morrison government has taken. But my word of encouragement would be for, given the critical role that Australia plays in the G20, I believe that Scott Morrison should step up and commit at least 5% of the total vaccine doses available, particularly because, the containment policy that the Australian government has adopted has been successful. The fact that right now you're seeing reported 2 cases right now compared to the, tens or hundreds of thousands of cases that you're seeing in other nations, I think is a sign that Australia can afford to be more generous. So this is Australia's moment, I think, on the international stage to step up and say, you know what, we're going to be one of the most generous nations with respect to vaccine contributions, because it's actually, as you say, in our enlightened self-interest to avoid mutant variants from ultimately becoming vaccine resistant in the future.
Big development on this front this week, wasn't there? So the Biden administration waiving patent protections for coronavirus vaccines. This is a game changer.
Well, I think, ultimately IP sharing is a critical pathway to unlocking manufacturing. But the thing I would say is that, ramping up manufacturing capability for vaccines is incredibly complicated. It's not like developing hand sanitizer where you just need some chemicals and alcohol. It's incredibly complicated. And also people want to make sure that their vaccines are from reputable sources, because if you're going to take a vaccine into your body, you want to make sure it's from not a generic company, but from a brand that you can trust. And so I think that while IP sharing is incredibly valuable, and we at Global Citizen welcome the Biden administration for doing so, what we've been calling on is for nations to immediately start dose sharing. Because by June, the US government, for example, will have enough additional doses beyond immunizing the entire population to fully vaccinate another 75 million people. So if you're looking for the most effective strategies to really stop COVID in the short term, it's got to be about immediate dose sharing right now.
You mentioned vaccine hesitancy before. We know we've spoken a lot about blood clots in Australia, and we don't use it for under 50s anymore. A lot of the younger population in India obviously need to be vaccinated. what's the equation right there? Is there some concern about the vaccine? Obviously, they've got a very different equation with COVID deaths versus Australia, but do you think they'd be able to use the doses? There'd be confidence in them?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the likelihood of blood clots is so significant compared to the challenges associated with contracting COVID-19 and ultimately either dying or suffering long-term health conditions. And so I think that this is really a question of making sure that we can immediately overcome vaccine hesitancy, because as you said earlier, Tom, if we don't immediately address the issue of ongoing mutations, then all vaccines will become ineffective and we'll have to start all over again. So I would strongly urge every government to make their full suite of vaccines, whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson or Oxford AstraZeneca, available to those who need them most.
Yeah, it's vaccine hoarding. We hope to avoid it. I just wanted to end finally, actually, Hugh, I feel I should let the viewers know that we actually went to high school together. I can tell you that a lot of people thought you were going places. You used to raise a staggering amount for World Vision. But did you ever think it would be this, CEO of a global charity and having such a big impact on the world?
Well, it's funny you say that, and I did love going to school with you, Tom. But I think that from my point of view, the fact that Global Citizen has been able to, have offices around the world and be of service to the mission to eradicate extreme poverty is what I dreamed of when I was a kid living in Australia, and I'm just thrilled that the organisation can continue to have an impact. And I think I attribute that to our hardworking team. We have an amazing team at Global Citizen, and they're incredibly dedicated to the mission of a world free from extreme poverty within our lifetime. So I hope that by the time you and I are much older, Tom, we will achieve that goal.
It's been an extraordinary effort so far. You do make a lot of us who went to school with you wonder what we're doing with our lives, but you're doing a lot, and we appreciate your time today. Hugh Evans, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.